Hello, everybody, and welcome to 30 Minute Thrive, your go-to podcast for anything and everything HR, powered by MRA, the Management Association. Looking to stay on top of the ever-changing world of HR? MRA has got you covered. We'll be the first to tell you what's hot and what's not. I'm your host, Sophie Bowler, and we are so glad you're here. Now it's time to thrive. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 35 of 30 Minute Thrive. I'm excited to talk about a topic that's called upon quite frequently on our HR hotline here at MRA, and that is job postings. So I'm here with Nicole Morehouse. She's our hotline manager at MRA, and Nicole, you'll be answering a lot of the questions that you hear from our members on a day-to-day basis. So excited to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. Nice to be here again.
Absolutely. Well, let's start out why we're talking about job postings, because we usually hear about this more from a recruiter side, and usually people think of recruiters when you talk about job postings. But how do they necessarily fit under the hotline category, which is more of a compliance and regulation based topic?
Right. So you brought me here, no fun, Nicole, compliance perspective.
Yes.
So, all right. Sounds good. Yeah, we do get some questions on the hotline about job postings. A lot of times that stems from, certain state requirements or local requirements. So most commonly this question is, compliance guidance when it comes to pay transparency most recently.
Gotcha. Well, like you just said, a big question revolves around pay transparency. So do you or should you or can you post salary information in job postings?
Yeah, so back 2021, Colorado was first to hit the scene with, hey, employers, you have to post, if you're going to put a job posting out and you want to hire someone in Colorado, then you have to have the pay range. So since then, several cities and states have joined in on that. So if you are posting a job where the candidate might be working in any of those locations, there's a good chance you either have to put the pay range or that you would have to have some sort of disclosure about the pay range at some point in the recruitment process.
Yeah, I feel like that's been a topic that's kind of changed recently, because I feel like years ago you didn't see even pay ranges in job postings, and now it's like pretty transparent.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. If you're a larger organization, you're probably doing that, right? because you're open to hybrid work arrangements, you're open to remote work arrangements. Those sorts of things. So if you're a multi-state employer, there's a good chance you're already used to putting some pay range information in there already. Yeah. If you're not, get ready for it, because there's pending legislation too. So these 17 different locations that have that's growing. I think it will be a big thing to be on the lookout for in 2023.
It's a good heads up. So what other rules and regulations do employers really need to keep in mind when crafting a job posting?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned earlier, right, if you're a federal contractor, your equal employment opportunity, perhaps you have to put some language about, veterans or, certainly disabilities and those sorts of things. So the Americans with Disabilities Act is something to think about when you do a job posting. Other things that you might want to keep an eye out for is any language that really creates a barrier between a candidate and you as the employer. Because using certain language could unintentionally create some sort of discriminatory hiring practice. I don't think employers go in with the intention that they're trying to discriminate against anybody,
right,
but including certain words can unintentionally give the reader a perspective about what the employer is looking for.
Absolutely. And let's kind of break down what you said a little bit. You mentioned inadvertent discrimination. So let's kind of talk more about that and what that means. So can you kind of give an example of what it is, or a definition of what inadvertent discrimination means when we're talking about job postings?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it could be a very subtle thing, just a very subtle word choice, using the word stronger or using the word firm, and those sorts of words that may be unintentionally. I think LinkedIn maybe in 2019 did some sort of survey, and that could draw male applicants.
Yeah.
And you unintentionally, is your entire candidate pool male, maybe because of the words that you used in the job posting, and you don't really know that it's going to have that sort of impact until the aftermath of doing that. But conversely, you could use the words like soft or compassionate. And then, is your candidate pool female? Maybe
that's
maybe
crazy
why.
to think about. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't think about using those words or that would cause discrimination, but I see where you're coming from.
Right. The bigger ones are probably going to be more like recent college graduates or green or, entry level. Sometimes can imply that you're looking for a younger worker. So the Equal Opportunity Commission specifically points out like, hey, employers don't use recent college graduate. Yeah. And there is some recent case law, right? That candidates are saying that they were discriminated against because of their age.
Wow.
Being older.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for sure. Well, we were kind of talking before the podcast, but they always recommend putting some like pizzazz or sizzle into your job description. So what are some suggestions so that the post doesn't lead to that inadvertent discrimination with that pizzazz?
Sure. Yeah, I've been on that end of things, right? I've been the recruiter putting a job posting out there and, kind of, trying to take the job description and then put it in kind of marketing language, yes. Right? Like trying to appeal to people and get people to read it and to then apply and sell your company. I would just be very careful with word choice. It has become a highly litigious sort of environment when it comes to these job postings and discrimination. And again, it's probably inadvertent, but be very, very careful about your word choice. Like I said before, like saying things that are going to specifically appeal to a young person or to, a person of any specific group, male, female,
right.
Any individual group. You want it to be a posting that will appeal to most everyone. And I know that's challenging because it's in the eyes of the reader, right? So how are you, you have to look at it from their lens if you're a candidate.
Yeah, that kind of just like reminds me of putting emojis in like a job posting. Like, does that create some sort of inadvertent discrimination? Because usually younger folks use those emojis. I don't know. That gets a little complicated.
For sure, because I think that there's, some, literature out there that discourages emojis in professional business writing, right? Emails or letters and those sorts of things, because emojis have a picture, right?
Yes.
And so that picture can be interpreted by one age group different than another age group. So I have a 20-something-year-old son. If I share an emoji with him, it might mean a completely different thing than I think it.
That's so true.
Yeah. So that's the same with job postings.
Yes. Oh, that's good. Well, do you have any advice for employers on staying up to date with all these rules on job postings and regulations?
Right. So if you're not fortunate to have an employment attorney at your disposal 24/7, you do want to rely on knowledgeable resources. I think the HR Advisor Hotline certainly is a really, really good option. We really are going to be very quick to find because there's local law. It's not just states. It's cities within states. So New York, there's like 3 cities within the state of New York that has some sort of pay transparency law. So we're going to be very quick to be able to find, the location, you're posting a job, like where are you posting it? Are you intending on attracting remote workers? And, so there's a lot of factors to consider before you finalize whether or not you include pay information, for example.
Yeah. So I guess I'm curious to know some of the common mistakes that employers also make when creating these job postings, and that may put them at risk for the non-compliance. So how can employers really avoid creating a job posting that doesn't comply with compliance?
That could be a whole other podcast. Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that I really could sum that up very easily, but anything that you run into in the employment arena can also apply to job postings. So the things that you think about for your current employees, you also want to think about in your job posting. So a lot of it has to do with, fair chance at employment, and fair chance at a competitive pay rate. And those are things that employers are thinking about for their current employees. So just spin it from the perspective of a candidate. But then there's, things that maybe employers have been putting in job postings previously that they didn't really realize were prohibited. Like the Department of Justice, for example, in 2022 went after several companies for putting language about immigration status in the job posting, and they assessed civil penalties that, got close to $1 million.
Yeah.
And so it's the things that you traditionally think about, and in the employment sense, just apply that to your candidates.
You gave some examples of this prior, but do you have any specific keywords that you want to mention to absolutely avoid in job postings? Not absolutely, but you might want to consider avoiding.
Words. Where do I start? I think I'm just going to go back to the previous example about the easiest one is, a younger worker. Yeah. You don't want to say anything about that you want young, recent college graduate, green. Those all imply that if you were not of a certain age, a young age, that you're not going to be qualified for the position. Certainly, job descriptions have to describe the duties and the requirements in a way that's defendable, right? So even college degrees, why is it required for the position? And you could be unintentionally discriminating against a group of individuals that largely don't have college degrees. So make sure if you put a college degree in there that you have a defendable reason why that's a selective criteria.
Yeah.
So it would be really hard to just throw out a couple of things other than the young as an easy example, but those are some other kind of examples, I guess.
Oh, those are good examples to keep in mind. So as we wrap up here, just want to emphasize resources that employers have available to them on job posting compliance. So if you want to reiterate where they can find that resource.
Yeah. If you don't want to call a hotline advisor, I don't know why you wouldn't want to, but if you don't want to call a hotline advisor, then you certainly, going straight to the location's .gov website, right? So if you're hiring in San Francisco, go check out San Francisco's employment laws, right? Make sure you're very knowledgeable. Our members also have access to some online tools that are more robust or comprehensive.
Absolutely.
And so that's something that if you don't know how to use those tools and you are a member, you can call the hotline and we'll walk you through, and then you can use them forevermore. So there are some tools at your disposal, but hotline, the tools that you have through your membership, and then make sure you actually go wherever you're recruiting. So if you have a job posting that you're open to remote work anywhere,
right?
That's pretty overwhelming, because that means that you have to check every city and every state to make sure you're in compliance. So that's what I think. If you don't have an attorney that's driving decisions for you, contacting hotline, using the resources that you have through your membership is probably the best deal around.
Yep, I would second that. I'm calling the hotline. Yeah. Cole's great. Well, I want to thank you for being on 30 Minute Thrive today and sharing all of that advice and good knowledge to our members and listeners today. So to our listeners, if you like this chat and this topic, I would just encourage you to like the episode, leave a comment, share it out with your friends and your coworkers, and consider joining MRA if you aren't a member already. Like Nicole said, we have all the resources you need, and we have resources in the show notes below, so take a look at those. Otherwise, we have Nicole's bio and her LinkedIn profile in the show notes, so you can get in touch with her easily there. But thank you for tuning in today, and thanks again, Nicole, and we will see you next week. And that wraps up our content for this episode. Be sure to reference the show notes where you can sign up to connect for more podcast updates. Check out other MRA episodes on your favorite podcast platform. And as always, make sure to follow MRA's 30 Minute Thrive so you don't miss out. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next Wednesday to carry on the HR conversation.